DFS. Welcome into week 14 of the most accurate DFS shows in the industry. This is the adjusted line play report presented by Zilla Fantasy Elite. I am your host, Todd Hoffman. You can find myself over on Twitter at ToddZilla1337. And you can find Zilla Fantasy Elite over on Twitter at Zilla Fantasy. All right, we got a small 10-game slate here, folks. Main slate anyway, 10 games. Quick audit. We are now at 10 of 13 weeks where we have made positive return on investment in our large field FanDuel tournaments. Large field being like 500,000 participants or more. So we're sitting at 10 of 13 weeks where we have won more than our entry fees going into the week. So very accurate information here. Good things to keep track of. Again, we're pitting the offensive and defensive line play against each other. And we're always told that the games are won and lost in the trenches. So why wouldn't DFS be the same thing? If games are being won and lost in the trenches, we should be able to figure out how the gameplay is going to go, and that's exactly what the adjusted line play report does. Let's get this underway with the number one game on the main slate, which is Minnesota at Detroit. 51.5 Vegas game total. It's actually been bet down 2 points since earlier in the week on Tuesday. Got Detroit actually 2-point home favorites. 26.75 team implied total there for Detroit, which is actually tied for second most on the slate. Minnesota at 24.75. They are number 7 on the slate, actually, at 24.75. We got a lot of them right around 26.75. Minnesota about 2 points below that, 7th in the week. Combined, number 1 on the slate. Let's get into Minnesota. Number 10 and number 19 in the offensive pass protection categories. Detroit 28th and 17th. Big favor there for Minnesota as far as their pass protection is concerned. They should be able to have plenty of time to pass the ball. It's going to be good for their air attack. You know, Justin Jefferson, Hawkinson, and the revenge game narrative there. KJ Hamler, I do like. KJ Osborne. As a dart throw this week, especially if Minnesota's going to get some time. This could be a back and forth affair with both offensive playing fast, as we'll get into that later. But he's a sneaky dart throw. Thielen's usually pretty low rostered, so this air attack outside of Justin Jefferson could be some sneaky plays in DFS. If you're looking for one of those dart throws to pick up off the waiver, KJ Osborne, you could do worse this week. As far as the run blocking, Minnesota 17 and 16, they're kind of going in the wrong direction there. They used to be green, now they're middle of the pack, a little bit below. Detroit 20 and 25, they're going the opposite direction. They used to be, pretty red. Now they're kind of going up. Sounds like the last 5 weeks or so, Detroit's run stopping defense is, top 3, top 5 unit in the league. This for me would be another fade Dalvin Cook scenario. The only caveat to that being if this is a back and forth affair, Minnesota might find themselves in plenty of scoring situations. Dalvin Cook, could find himself falling into the end zone twice, but not being necessarily the reason that Minnesota is getting into scoring position. So something, I wouldn't be surprised to see something where he's getting like 15, 16 carries. He's only getting 50 or 60 yards on those carries, but then he falls into the end zone once or twice just because Minnesota's getting into scoring position. Wouldn't be surprised to see that, but as far as DFS is concerned, I'm going to fade him. Expensive, and that's not the upside that I want. I do want the touchdowns, but that yardage total I don't think is going to be very good this week. On Detroit's side, they're number 2 and number 11 in the offensive pass protection categories. Minnesota 16 and 24. Pretty big favor there for Detroit's offensive line. Again, they should have plenty of time to pass the ball. As far as the run game, Detroit number 4 and number 10, Minnesota 12th and 14. That's also in the favor of Detroit's run game. They should be very effective at moving the ball. I do like DJ Chark. I like Amon-Ra St. Brown, and I like Swift on the Detroit side. Really, the only Brock Wright option at tight end is if you're trying to get super cheap on DraftKings, maybe you could get a piece of this game that's a little bit unique that not a ton of people are going to be going after. And he finds himself with 2 receptions, 15 yards, and scores. I don't think he's a multi-touchdown threat, but if they're going to be scoring a lot, you never know. You could look into Jameson Williams as well. I don't know if they're going to unlock him in this particular matchup or if he's just going to have his set snaps. I think last week he played 10, got the ball in his hands 3 or 4 times, if I remember correctly. So they are targeting him or getting the ball in his hands when he is on the field. So it's an option. I just don't know how much he's going to play. If he plays a lot, he could be a very good option this week. If he's not going to play more than 10 or 15 snaps, it's kind of an avoid for me. And just getting into the pace of play, Minnesota pretty much number 6 overall offensive play and number 7 when the situation's neutral. Detroit 9 and 8 in those, so both top 10 teams. When Detroit's leading, they're 4th fastest. When it's a close game, which this is projected to be according to Vegas, Minnesota's 3rd fastest in the league. So all signs pointing to this being a back and forth affair. Should be pretty high scoring, unless these guys kind of dud out Kirk Cousins, Jared Goff. They're certainly capable of having dud games. This is the highest game total on the slate by quite a bit. And it should be, end of the week. If everything goes according to plan, this should be the number 1 scoring game in the week. So keep that in mind. We'll get to the number 2 game on the slate here. Cleveland at Cincinnati. Cleveland, 26-point team implied total. This is number 5 on the slate. And Cleveland, 20.5-point team implied total for a Vegas game total of 46.5. We already dropped down basically 6 points from that number 1 game to 46.5 with this Cleveland-Cincinnati game at number 2. I do like this as far as the adjusted line is concerned. We look at Cleveland's offensive pass protection, 11 and 12. Cincinnati, 29 and 10 in the pass rush categories. Big favor here for Cleveland. They should have plenty of time to pass the ball. And it's pretty much good for their pass game. You're going to get a little bit more time. Hopefully Watson doesn't look like he's throwing balls into the ground like he did last week. And, it should be wheels up for DPJ and Schwartz maybe to have some of those longer bombs with Watson. We've seen him be very successful with Will Fuller in the past. That could be the case this week. Otherwise, we did see Amari Cooper get the biggest target load there in Cleveland last week. Is just, I think only less than a third of his balls were catchable. So if that changes, Amari Cooper could certainly have a big game here if Cleveland's playing catch up with Cincinnati. On the run game side, Cleveland 14 and 8, Cincinnati 18 and 16. Slight favor there for Cleveland, more of a studs eat scenario where, hey, this is a close matchup. If you're really good at football, you're going to have a good game. You're going to be able to overcome this evenly matched thing. That's Nick Chubb. And really, I don't expect the run game to be super effective, but Chubb's super good. He can overcome that, break out those long runs. I just don't expect it to be a super dominant thing there unless he's getting those big runs. So you'd have to expect some, quick hitters from him to be super successful here. I just think Cleveland's going to move the ball pretty well via the air, and they'll be fine on the ground considering they got the talent to do that. On the Cincinnati side, they're number 21 and 6 in the offensive pass protection categories. Cleveland's 17th and 21 at getting after the quarterback. Small advantage there for Cleveland's defense. Pretty much a studs eat scenario. Those who are good at football will overcome. Burrow definitely very good, but I think this is going to lean more towards a Higgins and Chase game. We should see Boyd and the kind of running backs maybe, as well as Hurst or the tight end, take a back seat in the air game in this one. I think this is going to be one of those Chase and Higgins weeks where they're getting 80% of the air game in this particular matchup, and that's kind of how I would attack it if I'm stacking Burrow. It's going to be those 2 big ones and then try to find some cheap options elsewhere. Probably a decent way to get off of the Detroit and Minnesota game as well. On the run blocking side, Cincinnati number 12 and 7, Cleveland 30th and 31st. This is very good for whatever running back actually plays. It sounds like Mixon maybe will be back this week. And if so, he's going to be the one in the backfield. He should see some pretty good success running the ball in this particular matchup. He is certainly a good piece to get in DFS if he's going to play. He could be, the goal line guy, and if Cincinnati's able to, move the ball somewhat effectively via the air with the studs, we should see Mixon maybe mix in. Very good. We should see him mix in with some efficiency on the ground, and if they're getting after the quarterback a little bit, he could see some targets there. P. Ryan tend to be the guy that catches the passes there in Cincinnati, but I do like this as far as both offenses being able to overcome their opposing defense, which leads me to believe maybe this Vegas game total will be a little bit higher than 46. Wouldn't be surprised maybe to see like a 30-27 game here, 30-24. 27-24, something like that, 27-21. And I do like Cincinnati's chances of winning. Don't see anything upset worthy here. Next, we'll get to the third game on the slate. There's actually two of them tied for third: Philadelphia New York Giants, and then Carolina Seattle. We'll get to the Philly Giants game here first on our way down. Again, 44.5 point team implied or Vegas game total there, tied for third on the slate with that Carolina Seattle game. Philly 25.75 team implied total as 7-point road favorites. The Giants 18.75 team implied total, and Philadelphia's team implied total, they're number 6 on the slate. Getting into their offensive pass protection, they're number 20 and then number 3 in the offensive pass protection categories. Giants 23rd and 28th. Philly might find themselves with a little bit additional time to throw the ball than they're used to, which is going to be good for A.J. Brown, going to be good for Devonta Smith. And it seems like those two are just kind of absorbing most of the targets since we saw Goddard leave. Really the only two I'd be necessarily attacking in this particular matchup. On the run blocking side, though, we have Philadelphia number 7 and number 1, the Giants 27th and 27th. Jalen Hurts always a threat to run the ball, but I believe this could be a big Miles Sanders week. We've seen him have big weeks in the past. He's not somebody that's super highly rostered in DFS lineups, so good way to get a good way to get away from what ends up being, a popular play with Jalen Hurts and his stacking options. Get Miles Sanders. He could certainly go over 100 yards and have 2 touchdowns on the ground in this particular matchup. I think that is within his range of outcomes, and that'd be a very good way to get off some of the other chalk in this particular main slate here. And let's go ahead. Let's hit the slate breaker. I'm going to call it right now. I think we could see Miles Sanders end up being that slate-breaking running back where, if you didn't have him in your lineups, you didn't perform nearly as well as those guys at the top end of the tournament. New York Giants, offensive side for the pass protection, 31st and 10th. Philly, second and second across the board, getting after the quarterback in those defensive pass rush categories. Philadelphia should be under duress here. Philly should be pressuring the Giants like crazy in this. I think Daniel Jones is going to be under duress. You might see him scramble a little bit more because of this, but he's going to need some quicker hitting throws, and that's going to be Barkley pretty much, or the tight ends there. Really, I don't know. Slayton, we've seen him have some good matchups, but I don't know if he's going to have a ton of time to throw to get the ball out to Slayton in this particular matchup. I don't like the Giants, in this particular scenario, to be able to move the ball very effectively via the air. It's going to be a lot of dump-offs and inefficient pass attempts. As far as the run blocking concerned, though, 29 and 13 for the Giants, Philly 24 and 23. This is a little bit closer, almost a neutral situation here where it's, studs eat. We certainly know that Saquon Barkley is a stud. So if I'm going to attack any piece of this, it's going to be the running backs. Like I said, I don't mind the Philadelphia pass attack in this, but I think Miles Sanders has a chance to be a slate breaker, especially if Philadelphia is turning the ball over on down, or Philadelphia is turning the Giants over on downs, making them punt a bunch. And then Barkley on the Giants side, I could see him have an effective game with 5 or 6 targets and then being somewhat effective on the ground. If he rips a long one, good. Otherwise, I don't know. He's probably just going to be mildly effective. But if they're not sustaining drives, it gets to be a little much to try to get a ceiling game from him. On to the other game that is tied for third is actually Carolina going into Seattle. Seattle is 4-point home favorites there, 24.25 team implied total for Seattle. Again, this is tied for third, but Seattle's team implied total is actually only 8th on the slate. Just keep that in mind. Maybe not particularly a game that you want to attack, but if it's going to be close and going back and forth, you never know. Either way, Carolina 20.25 team implied total. Again, that Vegas game total 44.5, tied for third. Carolina offensive pass protection number 18 and 30. Seattle 11 and 18. A little bit of a favor there for Seattle. Carolina, kind of used to not having a ton of time. I would expect that to be somewhat similar here, but not too crazy. As far as the run blocking side, Carolina number 8 and 18. Seattle 21 and 24. So with that being said, I think Carolina, if they're going to be moving the ball, it's going to be on the ground. I could see this being a Foreman and Chuba Hubbard week. Foreman's been the one who's been having the breakouts when it's been a viable option. Seattle's run defense, we just saw, got smoked last week and pretty much every week. So Foreman, certainly a play, or the Carolina running backs there just in general. If you got them in your seasonal long leagues, I think this is a week where you can expect them to put up some points. Maybe not a ceiling game, but they should be able to put up some points there on the Seattle defense. Carolina pass attack is just gross. You don't really want any part of it. DJ Moore, maybe. But that's really the only option there in Carolina outside of Foreman for any sort of DFS lineups. On Seattle's side, number 28 and 5 in the offensive pass protection categories. So pretty poor there, but luckily for them, Carolina 24 and 20. Carolina, not super great there. So Seattle might find themselves with a little bit more time to throw the ball than what they're used to, with Carolina's defense not being super great. I think that's how Seattle's going to move the ball. Looking at their run blocking, they're only 30 and 20 versus Carolina's 16 and 22. And it sounds like they pretty much, their top 4 options at running back. Penny's out for the season. Sounds like Walker's probably not going to play. DJ Dallas is banged up. Travis Homer is banged up. It might be the Tony Jones show in Seattle, and this is not looking good for him at 16 versus 30. I don't expect him to be very effective, and I expect Seattle to move the ball through the air, just having that additional time that they're not used to. I think it'll be good for Lockett. It'll be good for DK Metcalf as far as moving the ball. Don't be surprised if you see the tight ends getting some of those touchdowns if they find themselves within scoring position in the red zone. It seems like they like to target those tight ends. So I think that's going to be kind of how this matchup goes. I don't mind the Seattle pass game. I'm pretty much in a void on the Carolina side unless it's going to be Deonta Foreman. And if that's kind of getting one off in this particular matchup, it is tied for the third highest on the slate. It's not a great total at 44.5, but Seattle should be okay. Carolina should be okay if you want one-off pieces from the tied for third highest on the slate. You probably could do worse, and we'll get into that for sure. All right, now getting into the 5th highest total on the slate. We actually have 2 of those tied for 5th highest on the slate, and this is where we start getting some unique aspects. So even though this is tied for 5th on the slate, Dallas is the number 1 ranked team total on the week. So we have Dallas playing Houston as 17.5-point home favorites here with a team implied total of 30.75. Houston with one of the lowest team totals I've ever seen, 13.25 for a Vegas game total of 44. Again, tied for 5th on the slate. Getting into the Houston side here, they are 22 and 32 in the offensive pass categories. Dallas number 1 and number 1. Again, I think this is why Dallas's game total is so high. They're going to be getting after Houston crazy amount. Obviously, we'll get into their offensive side, which is also good, so expect to be putting up some points. Houston's going to be behind in those pass mode situations. Dallas is going to be getting after them big time. really you're going to need the quicker passes in Houston. I don't expect them to be very effective there. Kyle Allen has been terrible, much worse than Davis Mills. And if he's still in there, I could see Dallas, mini sack fumbles, pressures leading to interceptions. So Dallas defense in this particular slate could be like Cleveland last week with 30 points. Wouldn't be surprised to see that. They're probably going to be chalky. And just as a rule of thumb, if there's a chalky defense, they're typically in a void as far as DFS is concerned. But this could be, one of those exceptions where, oh man, it's so juicy. You just know they're going to be scoring over 20 points on defense there. Anyway, expect Houston to be under pressure. As far as who's going to get targeted, it's probably going to be Dameon Pierce out of the backfield if they're going to be under that much pressure. As far as the run blocking is concerned, Houston 23-31, Dallas 17-8 at stopping the run. Again, a little bit closer of a matchup here, so I think that favors Dameon Pierce and him being really the only effective option in Houston in this particular matchup. Getting into that highest offensive team total on the slate, number 3 and number 15 for Dallas, Houston 19 in the defensive pass rush categories. Should be plenty of time for Dallas to throw the ball. It's good for Gallup. It's good for Schultz. It's good for CeeDee Lamb. It's good for Tony Pollard. Basically, pick your poison. I think Dallas is going to be able to move the ball very effectively. They should have time. And wouldn't be surprised to see any of those guys that I just named with multi-touchdowns, including one via the air. Obviously, Schultz and Gallup most likely to be in the air. Lamb every once in a while will get a rushing attempt. But as far as the run blocking is concerned, that's even a better matchup. Dallas number 5 and number 3, Houston 28-28. Huge favor here. I see Dallas blowing them out. It's a 17.5 Vegas line. I don't know. That's got to be one of the top ones in all of history. Not necessarily number one. I think we've seen some get upwards of the 20 range. But this is getting up there as far as overall Vegas lines in the history of the sport. But yeah, expect Dallas to be able to move the ball even more effectively on the ground. This is good for Zeke. It's good for Pollard. Again, wouldn't be too surprised to see maybe even both of them have multi-touchdown games in this particular matchup. They do have Malik Davis as a third stringer. I wouldn't be surprised to see him, end up with 40 to 50 yards and a touchdown in this particular matchup. If you're playing on DraftKings, I'm sure that dude is pretty close to the stone minimum. And a very, very sneaky dart throw play this week. If Dallas gets up big, this could be one of those situations where it was Miami and Houston where Dallas is up 30 points already at halftime. The backups are in by, second drive of the third quarter, and Malik Davis ends up with, maybe 80 or 90 yards and a touchdown, and we're kind of seeing just an all-out explosion. Again, Dallas, attack them in DFS. You're going to want all sorts of pieces there. Even though it's the 5th highest game total on the slate, obviously Dallas is in a smash position here. Let's get to the other number 5 game on the slate, Kansas City and Denver. It's going to be a similar situation here where Kansas City is counting for most of the points in this particular team total, which is 44 Vegas game total. Kansas City 9.5 point road favorites, 26.75 team implied total. Again, tied for second after Dallas there is Kansas City, tied with Detroit actually and Buffalo, which we'll get into here after this game. So three teams there tied for second at 26.75. One of them is Kansas City. Denver 17.25 team implied total. Getting into the Kansas City side, number 4 and number 2 in the offensive pass protection categories. Denver 15-4. Their defense is solid as far as the pass game is concerned. It was a lot better before they started trading people there at the trade deadline, so it's kind of on the way down. Kansas City should be okay in the pass game. They should have plenty of time. I would like to see Kelsey with the bounce back here. I do expect that. Not only would I like to see it, I do expect that to be the case. I think Kelsey is in a smash spot here. And the run blocking is actually very interesting. Kansas City 6-11, Denver 25-17. This could be another big Isaiah Pacheco blow-up week. If Kansas City's kind of up big, we've seen Pacheco have rip off some pretty efficient running. I think that is going to be the case this particular week. I think from the Kansas City side, I want Kelsey and then maybe Pacheco. And that's how I would stack this particular thing with Mahomes is, hey, get him with Kelsey. Kelsey's certainly capable of, pulling in 3 or 4 touchdowns himself. And in those situations, you don't want any other pass catchers from the Kansas City side. But if Kansas City is going to be up big, it's almost a 10-point Vegas line here. And their run blocking looks like it's in a smash spot here. Pacheco could be the other beneficiary of scoring some of those touchdowns for Kansas City this week. So, 2 touchdowns from Kelsey, Mahomes, maybe 3 from Kelsey, and then we get Pacheco with a touchdown or 2 there. I think that's what I like on the Kansas City side. Their options for receiving outside of Kelsey is just kind of a dart throw. Pick your poison. If that's what you want to do is a double stack with Mahomes, be my guest. But that's probably not how I'm going to attack a lot of it. If I'm double stacking, it's probably going to be with a running back, actually. McKinnon does catch some passes, but I don't expect him to be in situations here where he's going to be getting a ton of volume in that aspect. As far as Denver's offense is concerned, 24-25 in the offensive pass protection categories. Kansas City 5-26. That's pretty good for Kansas City's defense to be getting after Denver. Denver should be in certain passing situations with Kansas City's offense performing so well. With that being said, I think Kansas City is a viable defensive option here, getting after Russell Wilson, interceptions, sack, fumbles, you name it. I think those are all on the table. As far as the run blocking is concerned for Denver, 19-28, Kansas City 26-18. I do like Denver's run game the best in this particular matchup, but it's not something that I'm interested in playing. I know Denver's going to be pushed for sure to push the ball. Kansas City should be good. I just don't think Denver's in a situation where they're going to be able to move the ball very effectively. Bet they're under as far as their team total. I would be surprised if they got to 17, and that would still be under their team implied total here. I would expect them more to be in the 3 to 10 range in this particular matchup. Just keep that in mind. Not somebody that you're going to want in DFS. If you got other options in your seasonal long leagues, get out of the Denver side of those options. All right, heading to the number 7 game on the slate. Again, number 7 doesn't sound so good, but it's one of those situations where one of the teams is coming up with most of those points, and that would be Buffalo. Buffalo, 10-point home favorites, 26.75 team implied total. Jets, 16.75 team implied total for a Vegas game total, 43.5 overall. Getting into the Jets side, number 12 in the offensive pass protection, number 23 in the pass DVOA versus Buffalo, 14-7. Pretty stale matchup here as far as the just overall pass protection categories. Jets should be able to have an average game where the studs eat. I don't think Mike White is a stud, but it certainly seems like Garrett Wilson's good, and I do like his chances of producing in this particular matchup. The Jets do have some pretty solid pass catchers there with Corey Davis and Elijah Moore. They got plenty of targets there. Conklin were all solid options. If I was going to go that route in the Jet side, I think I'm attacking Wilson. I'm attacking Conklin. I don't want to go those other routes. They haven't necessarily proven themselves to have that sort of ceiling game potential. Elijah Moore, we did see 2 targets and put together some points on those 2 targets a few weeks ago, but outside of that, he doesn't get enough volume. But I do believe this is how the Jets are going to have to move the ball in Buffalo. They are number 22 and 12 in the blocking categories, run blocking categories, and Buffalo number 3 across the board. So that's a huge favor for Buffalo. I don't expect the Jets to be able to run the ball very effectively. Zonovan Knight probably not going to be super effective on the ground. If you feel like the Jets are going to be under pressure passing the ball, maybe Zonovan Knight and those guys get some pass catching work there, but I think it's going to be the Jets in the pass game. Just getting into the weather aspect, it does sound like Buffalo will be getting a little bit of snow, but only like 10-mile-an-hour winds. I don't know how much snow exactly is going to be there, but that kind of changes things up there for the run game as well. Kind of slows everything down a little bit, but the wind is the biggest factor, and that seems to be in check in this particular week. So hopefully the Jets can have a better pass game there. As far as Buffalo's offense is concerned, number 6 and number 4 in the offensive pass protection categories, the Jets, number 9 and number 5. I don't expect Buffalo to be able to just dominate in the air game in this particular matchup. This is kind of one of those studs eat scenarios, and I think this is going to be a monster Stephon Diggs week. I would expect, something in the range of 12 receptions, 150 yards, multiple touchdowns, certainly on the table. I think he's going to be the one who is focused on in the pass game in this particular matchup and this studs eat kind of situation. The run blocking is not very good for Buffalo either. Number 20 and 17, the Jets 8 and 11 at stopping the run. I don't expect Buffalo to be very effective running the ball. We saw James Cook kind of come out of nowhere last week. To have a solid game, I think Buffalo is going to be moving the ball via the pass game in this. And it's going to be beneficial, I believe, mostly for Diggs. But, hey, if they're under pressure, you might see Dalvin Cook and the running backs there get a few more targets. Dawson Knox get a few more targets in this, especially if it's going to be kind of a snowy, keep it underneath type thing. Knox might be another decent option in the Buffalo game there. Again, they're tied for second most team implied total. So Knox as your tight end getting a touchdown, not a terrible idea. Just getting into the pace, the Jets do play pretty fast. They're number 4 in overall pace of play on offense, and Buffalo number 5. We always talk about how fast Buffalo is. The Jets are pretty fast too, and with Mike White, they seem to be at least serviceable. Again, I could see this being more of a back and forth affair, and while I don't expect the Jets to necessarily upset Buffalo, they are 10-point underdogs. I think this is going to be a lot closer than people expect. So I think the Buffalo fans are going to get a little bit sweaty despite the snow there. And expect it to be a little bit closer. I think Buffalo, they're going to kind of struggle a little bit on offense. It's going to run through Diggs, and it's going to be, more underneath things. The Jets, their pass attack is kind of where it's going to be at. And, if they don't get a ton of turnovers there, we've seen Josh Allen be turnover prone. It could go both ways. I expect the Jets to keep this one a little bit closer than people are expecting this 10-point Vegas line. I think the Jets cover, and maybe it gets a little bit dicey for some of those people in their pick'em leagues. And, if you're still alive in your survivor pools and you haven't picked Buffalo yet, they might be a little bit sweaty too. Getting into the 8th game on the slate, Jacksonville and Tennessee. Tennessee are 3.5-point home favorites over Jacksonville here. 41 Vegas game total. Tennessee 22.25 team implied total. Jacksonville 18.75 team implied total. Getting into the Jacksonville offensive pass protection, 9 and 13 versus Tennessee 19 and 22. Jacksonville should have time to throw the ball. This is good for their air game. I don't mind Christian Kirk in this. It seems like when they have a little bit extra time, Kirk and Zay Jones are the ones that benefit the most. On the offensive run blocking side, 26 and 23, not very good. And even worse is Tennessee is number 1 across the board. Don't expect Jacksonville to be very effective running the ball. I don't like Etienne in this particular matchup. Looks like Jacksonville should have time to throw. Won't have a ton of time, pressure leading to more dump-offs. I do like the Jacksonville pass game in this to be pretty successful. Trevor Lawrence bounce back. Certainly a potential. He's going to be really low rostered, I believe, in this particular week, considering all these high game totals with Dallas, Buffalo, Kansas City, the Detroit-Minnesota game, Cincinnati. I think Trevor Lawrence could be one of those sneaky stacking partners where, hey man, he was very low rostered and he put up roughly the same amount of points as all these other guys. I think that's certainly on the table this week. On the Tennessee side, they're number 29 and 14 in the offensive pass protection categories. Not very good, fortunately for them. Jacksonville 31st and 31st. Tennessee should have time to throw the ball. This should be good for Burks if he's back from the concussion the hit that he took to his head. Robert Woods should be also somewhat effective in this particular matchup. I think they're just going to have a little bit of extra time to get that ball out. If you think the offensive line is that poor, they might be dumping it off a little bit more to Derrick Henry, which wouldn't be the worst thing in the world either. On the run blocking side for Tennessee, 16-21. Jacksonville, 11-13. A little bit slight favor there for Jacksonville. I don't expect Tennessee's run game to be necessarily super effective, but we have seen Derrick Henry absolutely dominate the Jacksonville Jaguars in his career, so I wouldn't be terribly surprised if that is the case. It just doesn't, matchup-wise project to be one of those games for Derrick Henry. I expect the Tennessee pass game to be a little bit better if Jacksonville's moving the ball. Via the air, I could see this one kind of hitting the over in this particular matchup as the air game becomes the most effective pass route and what the coaches end up deciding to do in the game. Getting into the ninth game on the slate, Tampa Bay at San Francisco probably would have been a nice one had the season gone how we thought in the preseason, but now it's an ugly game. San Francisco, 20.5. Team implied total as 3.5 point home favorites. At 20.5, they are 3.5 point home favorites. Put that into your brain. That means Tampa Bay 17 point team implied total. For a Vegas game total of 37.5, they are 9th on the slate out of 10. Believe it or not, 37.5 Vegas game total is not the worst one on this slate. Tampa Bay, number 1 and number 9 in the offensive pass protection category is very good. San Francisco, number 8 and number 6, also very good. Expect this to be one of those evenly matched matchups. We've seen Tampa Bay, it doesn't matter if they have a great matchup, if it's a poor matchup, they tend to struggle. This is going to be one of those where I think they tend to struggle. It's going to probably be more of a, for sure, a Chris Godwin, but dump offs to the running back week. Cade Otton, we saw, usually if they're getting under pressure, he gets targeted. And then maybe Russell Gage, Julio Jones. This is more of a fade Mike Evans week for me. Maybe fade pretty much all Tampa Bay, offense just in general. On the run blocking side, Tampa Bay 24-30, red across the board. San Francisco number 2 across the board at stopping the run. Expect Tampa Bay's run game to be very ineffective in this. If the Rashad White and Leonard Fournettes of the world are going to get any points, it's going to be via 6 or 7 pass attempts going their direction. So they're going to be getting targeted as San Francisco gets after the quarterback there, and that's really. Godwin and if you want to say the running backs are going to get some targets, that's about how I think this game's going to go. I don't think Tampa Bay is going to be very good in this one. San Francisco, Brock Purdy, probably the quarterback there. Number 13 and 7 in the pass protection categories. Tampa Bay 3 and 8. They can get after the quarterback. Might not be a good showing for Brock Purdy. Again, 37.5 Vegas game total. This isn't looking good for Tampa Bay's offense. It's not looking good for San Francisco's offense in the pass categories anyway. As far as the run game, San Francisco number 9 and 22, Tampa Bay 7 and 10. Pretty evenly matched there on this end. Again, those are stud matchups where those who are good at football can usually overcome those things. So Christian McCaffrey on the San Francisco side, I think he's about the only option you can play in this game. If San Francisco is going to be under pressure, I could see McCaffrey, getting 6 to 8 targets in this, and then in the run game being somewhat effective, considering it's a studs eat scenario, he can kind of overcome those evenly matched offensive line plays. And I really think out of this game, that's about the only way that you can attack it. If you're going to get any pieces, it better be Christian McCaffrey. But if you're going to be paying up for him in DFS, that's a bad idea in a game total this low. But he is the only one I think that has ceiling in this particular matchup. Godwin coming in distant second as far as what kind of output we can expect from anybody in this particular game. It's an avoid pretty much across the board. And believe it or not, there is a worse game. Baltimore going into Pittsburgh. Vegas game total of 36.5 points, so even one worse than the previous game. Pittsburgh actually 2-point home favorites, 19.25 team implied total as the favorite. 17.25 team implied total for Baltimore there as the underdog. Again, worst game in the main slate. Number 19 in offensive pass protection for Baltimore, 8 in the DVOA category. Pittsburgh 26 and 15. They're coming back with TJ Watt, and they've been getting pressure on the quarterback. So this might not be as much of a favor for Baltimore as it looks on paper. Expect them to be under duress, whether it's Tyler Huntley or Lamar Jackson in this. I think you need to make some plans to avoid the Baltimore pass game. The run game is even worse. Baltimore 28 and 2, Pittsburgh 15 and 12. Don't expect Baltimore to be able to run the ball very effectively in this. Again, low game total, especially if Lamar is not there. I really don't like this Baltimore pass game. But the only thing on the Baltimore side is Mark Andrews. I wouldn't be surprised to see him with 7 or 8 receptions in this, but what is he going to get, 80 yards and no touchdowns? That might be his week, and not a huge upside there for him. On the Pittsburgh side, number 17 and 22 in the offensive pass protection category, 6 and 11 from Baltimore's defense. They should be able to get after the quarterback here. They're going to need quicker throws from Pittsburgh, which is probably a little bit better for Deontay Johnson and Pat Freiermuth in this particular matchup. Also dump offs to the running backs. I wouldn't be surprised to see that. In the run game, Pittsburgh 11 and 15, Baltimore 9 and 6. This is more of a evenly matched thing. Studs eat. I don't think necessarily Najee Harris is a talent stud. He's just he's big and he is decent at football. I just don't think he's good enough to overcome poor offensive line play. I don't expect Pittsburgh to be able to move the ball very well. And really, I wouldn't be surprised if this game does hit the under. If Lamar Jackson does play, I do expect Baltimore to be able to maybe upset Pittsburgh there at home. Again, that's if Lamar plays. I think he has the talent to overcome this particular matchup concern, and it doesn't look like Pittsburgh's going to be very good on offense. So if that's the case, I think Lamar has the talent to take over the game and push them to a 13-10 victory, something like that. Just expect it to be ugly as Vegas does here with the 36.5 team total. And that will do it for the main slate. Let's get into the 2 island games, Sunday night, Monday night. Hopefully they're a little bit more interesting to talk about than the last 2 games, which make you want to throw up. So, Sunday Night Football, Miami going into Los Angeles to face the Chargers as 3-point road favorites. 27.75 team implied total for Miami. That would be number 2 on the slate, the main slate by itself. So pretty high total there. The Chargers 24.75 team implied total for a Vegas game total of 52.5 currently. This is being recorded Friday morning. Miami offensive pass protection, number 14 and number 1. Los Angeles Chargers 26 and 16. That is in the favor of Miami. They should have a decent amount of time to throw, not an extraordinary amount of time, but a decent amount of time to throw. Tyreek Hill, Waddle should be very good in this. It seems like when these slight benefits, or it's 6, 7 range, 8 range for Miami's pass protection, we see Gesicki get some decent games there, so keep an eye on that. But Hill and Waddle, definitely the players that you're going to want in an island game. If you want to get a little bit different, Gesicki might have a solid week based on this. The run blocking side, Miami 13 and 14. The Chargers 29 and 30. Miami run game should be all wheels, man. This it's a little bit weird though because the usage has been kind of going back and forth. So I don't know where we're going to be in this particular game. Is it going to be Jeff Wilson? Is it going to be Mostert? We saw Mostert get most of the volume against San Francisco, and prior to that, it was more the Jeff Wilson show. So pick your poison there. Maybe pick both in this particular matchup if you think they're going to both be effective and get off the more chalky Miami pass game, and in island game there it might be a little bit unique. As far as the Chargers are concerned, number 7 and 24 in the offensive pass protection categories, Miami 20 and 23. I also expect the Chargers to have plenty of time to throw the ball. It's going to be good for their pass catchers. I don't think Mike Williams is back yet, but Keenan Allen's been looking good. We've seen Palmer be serviceable, but I don't see necessarily a ceiling there, and he's probably a little bit more expensive. Eckler always an option in the pass game. As far as the run blocking is concerned, it's not good. Chargers 27 and 29, Miami 4 and number 9. Don't expect Los Angeles to be running the ball very effectively. It's going to come through the air. With that being said, if I'm going to be attacking a quarterback in this one, I'm probably going to be leaning Herbert and trying to get into that Miami run game. I think that will be the lower end of the stack, and maybe you want to get in 3 running backs into your thing. Eckler, the 2 running backs from Miami, Herbert, and then find some cheap options to fill in the rest of your stuff for those island matchups. I think that's going to be how you would attack this. Should be a pretty high-scoring affair, which is a lot more fun to talk about than the previous game, so keep that in mind. Should be a fun one on Sunday nights with some points being scored. Monday Night Football, probably not the same as Sunday night, though. New England going into Arizona is 1.5-point favorites currently as of Friday. 43-point Vegas game, 43.5-point Vegas game total. New England 22.5 of that, Arizona 21. They expect it to be close, which can be good for some back and forth affairs. Is what you want if you're starting any of these guys in your seasonal long leagues. New England offensive pass protection 27-21, Arizona 25-25. That's a neutral. New England maybe finds themselves with a little bit extra time to pass the ball than they're used to against this Arizona defense. I like Jacoby Myers this week. I think he should be solid. Could also be good for Hunter Henry in this particular matchup. It kind of leans more towards like the studs eat scenario. I don't think New England's got any other solid pass game options there. Run game option, pretty much the same thing. 21-26, Arizona 22-19. Ramondre Stevenson should produce in this, especially if you think Arizona can get after New England with that poor offensive pass protection category. Stevenson, plenty capable of getting 6-7 targets, so keep that in mind. He's probably going to be very popular, or one of the most popular plays on the slate, but for good reason, perhaps, on the New England side. For Arizona, number 15 and 29 in the offensive pass protection categories. New England good at getting after the quarterback, number 4, number 3. New England defense in an island game certainly in play here. They should be able to get after the quarterback, which is Kyler Murray. He's got coming off a bye week, I believe, there, so is he going to be more well prepared? How's he going to play? If he's getting pressured, you may see some mistakes from him. We'll see. Run blocking is probably even worse there. 25-27 for Arizona. New England 13-7. I don't expect Arizona to be able to move the ball very effectively in this. Really, it's going to scream DeAndre Hopkins to me. I don't think Arizona's going to have a ton of other options to be able to move the ball very effectively, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Hopkins, with 9 or 10 receptions in this, but not being very efficient or very effective with those targets, and that's really how I would attack the Arizona side in this particular matchup. Again, in island game, I do like Mac Jones and Stevenson, Jacoby Myers, New England defense, Hopkins, and see what you can make work from there. With that being said, that's going to do it all for this Week 14 slate. Only, we got 6 teams on bye, so 3 games less to talk about this particular week, minus the Thursday night game. So appreciate you tuning in. Hopefully you are subscribed. If you're not, hit that subscribe button. Again, on Twitter, at Todzilla1337. For Zilla Fantasy Elite, it is at Zilla Fantasy. Thanks again for watching. I very much appreciate it. Let's go win some money together in this Week 14 slate. Thank you. Bye.